Welcome to today's talk. It's Tuesday the 16th of April 2024. My talk today is called Awakening from the Absurd, Reshaping a Society's Belief System. And I really would like to shed light on misconceptions that have shaped our worldview on critical issues governing our societies. Whether you're aware of it or not, we've spent our lives believing in concepts that upon closer examination appear utterly absurd. What's more, these concepts pertain to the core matters that influence political landscapes, including health, economics, the economy, and education. I'd wager that almost everyone subscribes to the notion that governments tax individuals and businesses to fund infrastructure, sustain our healthcare systems, and support education. However, I must tell you that this belief is not just erroneous, but also a root cause of the current societal turmoil we find ourselves in. The recent upheavals, perhaps catalyzed by the pandemic, have prompted a reckoning with the absurdity that is ingrained in our systems. Interestingly, even those within government harbour the same flawed beliefs regarding the origin of money. Allow me to explain, and this will be a little bit difficult for you to accept. However, people once were lining up to get vaccinated. Where are those lines today? There are none, of course, which is an indication that it is possible to completely change one's beliefs. Let's begin with economics, as it lies at the heart of the issue. While I delve deeper into economic theories in other presentations, today I'll illustrate the workings of the current fiat currency system using New Zealand as a case study, given its similarity to many other Western nations. In today's digital age, physical cash plays a diminishing role, with transactions predominantly conducted via cards or electronic devices that displays one's account balance, or rather one's score. This score represents an agreement between parties, a promise of value exchanged for goods or services. Consider this scenario. Suppose a government decides, with public consent, to construct a large bridge over a river. They contract a consulting firm to design the bridge, thereby transferring funds from the government score to the consultant score. The consulting firm compensates its employees for their services, diminishing its score while boosting theirs. These employees in turn spend their earnings on various goods and services, perpetuating the cycle of score exchange, which really is the economy. Remarkably, throughout this process, no physical money changes hands. Transactions occur electronically, with mere alterations in pixel configurations on screens. That's right, it's just digits on a screen that change. The concept of money itself becomes nebulous. It's a shared illusion upheld by societal consensus. To clarify, I don't find fault with the current fiat money system per se. The term fiat simply denotes value ascribed by authority. However, the lack of understanding surrounding the system leads to vast amounts of unnecessary human suffering. In essence, our collective misunderstanding of the nature of money, perpetuates societal issues. It's time to demystify these concepts and pave the way for a more enlightened discourse on economic and societal structures. Now, let me explain the suffering. While governments operate under the misconception that they must bolster their score to fund projects like bridge construction by diminishing the scores of individuals and businesses, this belief is fundamentally flawed. It's a fallacy perpetuated not only by governments, but also by the educational system that instills this belief in everyone from school kids to university students. If governments truly comprehended their role, they would adopt a more holistic approach. They'd engage with society, prioritise projects based on public demand, assess available resources, solicit tenders, and compensate providers promptly for their services. This process would continue until full employment is achieved, businesses thrive, and the individuals across the socio-economic levels are adequately remunerated. A state reminiscent of New Zealand's prosperity in the mid-20th century. However, in New Zealand, an impediment to such progress lies in Clause 26G of the Public Finance Act, which erroneously dictates that government spending must be matched by taxation. This misconception stifles economic growth and perpetuates unnecessary hardship. Governments operate under the false premise that they must balance their budgets like household finances. This is despite them being the sole issuer of the currency. It's absurd. In reality, governments inject money into the economy through spending, as I've previously outlined, yet they constrain themselves by clinging to the notion that money is finite and must be sourced from taxation. They not only needlessly constrain themselves by limiting their spending, they also constrain people and businesses by lowering their score through both earnings and goods and services taxes. How on earth is it possible for humans to flourish when the state constrains itself and people's ability to actually contribute to the economy? Instead, taxes should be used as a tool to curb negative influences in society. For instance, they should tax the hell out of those giant corporations that have figured out how to get the money, or the public to give them all their money. If left untaxed, these giant corporations become so big they're out of control. Look at Pfizer as an example. It has become psychopathic. Their drugs are killing and injuring people in the millions. This flawed economic ideology has global ramifications, leading nations to falsely believe they are financially strained when they inject more money into the economy than they collect in taxes. In New Zealand, for instance, the current government's promise of tax cuts has been met with scepticism from a populace entrenched in this backward economic thinking. Instead of embracing relief, they paradoxically reject it, citing fiscal constraints. This is a testament to the persuasive impact of these absurdities. In essence, it's imperative to challenge these antiquated notions and redefine the role of taxation in economic governance. By dispelling the myth of financial scarcity and embracing a more enlightened approach to fiscal policy, we can pave the way for a more equitable and prosperous society. The state of our healthcare system is equally alarming and flawed, rife with corruption and further absurdities. Currently, the system is structured to perpetuate unhealthy dietary habits, leading individuals down a path of disease and dependence on pharmaceuticals. Rather than addressing root causes, the focus is on managing symptoms with medications, creating a cycle of dependency and declining health. Just look at the statistics as the evidence. In certain countries, participation in the healthcare system necessitates insurance coverage, transforming healthcare into a profit-driven enterprise. Conversely, in nations like New Zealand and the UK, government funding healthcare facilities see themselves as safety nets, albeit ones that fail to address underlying causes. The recent pandemic has highlighted the healthcare system's penchant for overreach, with authorities assuming the role of disease predictors and imposing mass vaccination campaigns, locking people up and forcing a one solution for all. The repercussions of this misguided approach are dire, with skyrocketing mortality rates and increased incidence of cancer that will echo for generations to come. It's imperative that we hold these institutions accountable for their actions. Yet we rather absurdly believe they will come clean themselves. A reimagined healthcare system should prioritise preventative measures, starting with education in the home and integrated into the schooling curriculum. Children should receive comprehensive nutritional education, emphasizing the dire consequences of processed food and excessive sugar consumption. For me, optimal nutrition entails consuming only organic whole foods within an 8-hour window or thereabouts. I supplement it by regular exercise. And by limiting foods high in lectins and embracing a balanced lifestyle, individuals can take proactive steps towards better health and longevity. Education and healthcare are intertwined, each influencing the other profoundly. And this brings me to the critical issue of education. The shortcomings of our current educational system are glaring. It has bred a population susceptible to manipulation, believing in patently absurd notions, from the fallacy that the government requires your money to stimulate the economy, to the misguided belief that reckless dietary habits can be offset by pharmaceuticals and vaccines, or even the notion that government-trained bureaucrats can adequately educate our children. These are but a few examples of the widespread delusions ingrained in our societies. Let's not delude ourselves. Hardly anyone is immune to these falsehoods. Generations have been conditioned to accept them without question. So it's time for a collective awakening, a re-education to understand how the world truly functions, not the distortive narrative that we've been fed. Consider other prevalent absurd beliefs, such as the misconception that driving petrol-powered cars contributes to bad weather, or the misguided fear of increased CO2 levels. Society has even embraced the divisive notion that, like the fluidity of gender identity, often with punitive consequences for the dissenters. In New Zealand, the myth of the Maori race that once owned the entire country persists. This is despite historical evidence that prior to the 1840s, no one was known as being a Maori in New Zealand at all. The noun Maori didn't even exist in the 1840s. These social constructs, if left unchallenged, breed groupthink and pave the way for conflict and turmoil. We stand at a crossroads. Either we acknowledge the failures perpetuated by these absurdities and chart a new course, or we continue down the path towards a dystopian future. I believe our salvation lies in supporting leaders willing to defy conventional wisdom and challenge the status quo. It's time to reclaim our critical thinking skills and forge a pathway towards a more enlightened society. Thank you for your time today. I've been Andy Oakley.